I need to tell you something about the national forests. Something they don't put in the training manuals or the visitor brochures. Something that's kept me awake every night for the past 6 months, replaying in my mind like a broken film reel that won't stop. My name is Ira Saephan, and I've been a forest ranger for 8 years. I've seen bears, mountain lions, and weather that could kill you in minutes. I've pulled lost hikers out of ravines and tracked poachers through dense timber. I thought I'd seen everything these woods had to offer. I was wrong. What I'm about to tell you happened last October during a routine backcountry patrol in the Bitterroot Range. It was supposed to be 14 days of solitude, just me, my radio, and 200 square miles of pristine wilderness. By day 3, I knew something was watching me. By day 7, I understood it wasn't an animal. And by day 10, when I found the research facility that shouldn't exist, I realized that some people already knew about it. If you work in the national forests, or if you're planning to hike deep into the backcountry, you need to hear this. Because once you know what's out there, you can never look at the trees the same way again. 3 years ago, I lost someone. A hiker named Daniel Corver, 26 years old, experienced outdoorsman, and he vanished on my watch in the span of 20 minutes. We never found his body, never found his pack, never found a single trace of him after he stepped off the marked trail to take a photograph. The investigation cleared me of negligence, but it didn't matter. I knew the truth. I'd failed to protect someone under my care. That's why I started taking the solo assignments, the deep wilderness patrols that other rangers avoided, the 2-week expeditions where you're so far from civilization that your radio barely reaches the relay stations. If I was alone, I couldn't fail anyone else. If I was alone, I could maintain complete control. That logic made sense until last October, until I learned that in the deepest parts of the forest, you're never really alone. And control is just an illusion we tell ourselves to sleep at night. This is what happened during those 14 days. This is what they don't want you to know. The Bitterroot Range in October is something close to heaven. That's what I was thinking as I locked Carl's truck and shouldered my pack on that first morning. The aspens had turned gold, and the early frost made everything sharp and clean. 2 weeks of this. 2 weeks of silence, solitude, and the kind of work that keeps your hands busy and your mind quiet. Carl Fortier, my supervisor, stood by the truck bed, arms crossed. He'd driven me out to the trailhead himself, which was unusual. "You sure about this one, Ira?" he asked, squinting at the tree line. "It's a long haul. Sector 7's pretty remote." "That's why I'm good at it," I said, adjusting the straps on my pack. 60 pounds of gear, enough food for 16 days in case I needed the buffer. Water purification, first aid, repair supplies. I'd checked everything 3 times. Carl didn't smile. "Radio check-ins every morning and evening, no exceptions. Janice'll have my ass if you miss one." "When have I ever missed one?" He paused, and something flickered across his face. Concern, maybe. Or something else I couldn't quite read. "Just stay sharp out there, all right? And if anything feels off, I'll call it in. I know the protocols, Carl." He nodded slowly, but his eyes lingered on the mountains. Yeah, you do." He climbed back into the truck, started the engine, then stopped, rolled down the window. "Ira, there's been some weird reports from Sector 7 over the years. Nothing concrete, just weird." "How?" Carl's jaw worked for a moment. "Hunters seeing things, hikers getting turned around in areas they swear they knew. It's probably nothing, animals, weather patterns. You know how it is. People get spooked when they're alone out there." "I'll be fine," I said, and I meant it. I'd done this dozens of times. Carl drove away, and I watched his tail lights disappear down the access road until the forest swallowed them completely. Then I turned toward the trail and started walking.
The first day was perfect. I made good time, covering nearly 12 miles through familiar terrain. The trail was well maintained here, marked with the old metal blazes we'd installed years ago. I spotted a bull elk around noon, massive 6-point rack, and stopped to photograph him for the wildlife log. He watched me with those dark, liquid eyes, then crashed away through the undergrowth. By late afternoon, I'd reached my planned campsite, a small clearing beside Crooked Creek, sheltered by a half-circle of Douglas firs. The water ran clear and cold, perfect for filtering. I set up my tent with practiced efficiency, gathered wood, built a fire ring with stones from the creek bed, everything by the book, everything controlled. That night, I made contact with Janice, our dispatcher. Her voice crackled through the radio, warm and familiar. "Ranger Saephan checking in. How are those knees holding up?" I smiled beside myself. "Still attached. Day 1 complete. No issues. Weather's clear. Creek's running strong. I'm at the Crooked Creek site." "Copy that. Forecast looks good for the next few days. Get some rest. You got a long haul tomorrow." "Will do. Saephan out." I ate my freeze-dried dinner watching the fire, listening to the forest settle into its evening rhythms. Somewhere in the distance an owl called. The creek murmured over stones. The flames popped and hissed. This was why I did it. This peace, this simplicity. I was cleaning my cooking pot when I noticed it. Nothing dramatic, just a feeling at first, like cobwebs brushing the back of my neck. I looked up from the pot, scanning the tree line. The forest had gone completely silent. No owl, no creek sounds, no wind in the branches, just nothing. I stood slowly, setting down the pot. My hand moved instinctively toward my bear spray on my belt. "Hello?" My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. The silence stretched. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Then, from somewhere in the darkness beyond my firelight, I heard it. Footsteps, crunching through leaves, circling my camp in a slow, deliberate arc. But when I swept my flashlight toward the sound, there was nothing there. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I sat with my back against a log, flashlight in one hand, bear spray in the other, watching the tree line until my eyes burned. The footsteps had stopped after maybe 10 minutes, and the forest sounds had gradually returned. The creek, the wind, the distant owl. But something felt wrong. The silence that had fallen over my camp wasn't natural. Animals don't go quiet like that unless there's a predator. But I hadn't seen anything. No eyes reflecting in my flashlight beam. No shapes moving through the undergrowth. Nothing. By dawn, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Lack of sleep playing tricks. Maybe I'd heard a deer, and my exhausted brain had interpreted the sound as something circling. It happened. The mind does strange things in the wilderness when you're alone. I made coffee over the rekindled fire, hands wrapped around the metal cup for warmth. The morning was crisp, frost glittering on the tent fly, beautiful, normal. I checked my map and planned the day's route, 8 miles north through increasingly rough terrain, following Crooked Creek upstream to its source, then over the ridge into the upper valley. "Ranger Saephan, morning check-in," I said into the radio at 0700 sharp. Janice's voice came through clear. "Morning, Ira. How'd you sleep?" I hesitated. The protocol was to report anything unusual. But what would I report? That I'd heard footsteps? That the forest went quiet for a few minutes? It sounded paranoid, even in my own head. "Fine. Heading north today. Should reach the upper valley by evening." "Copy. Weather's still holding. Stay safe out there." "Will do." I broke camp methodically, checking that everything was packed and secured. It was nearly 8 by the time I shouldered the pack and started up the trail. The creek burbled beside me, and sunlight filtered through the canopy in golden shafts. My unease from the night before began to fade with each mile. By noon, I'd climbed nearly 2,000 feet. The trail narrowed here, less maintained, marked only by occasional blazes on the trees. This was real backcountry, the kind of terrain where you could walk for days without seeing another human being. I stopped for lunch at a small overlook, eating trail mix and jerky while I surveyed the valley below. That's when I saw the smoke. Just a thin wisp, maybe half a mile back the way I'd come, gray-white against the green. Someone else had made camp near where I'd been this morning. My stomach tightened. Carl said Sector 7 was remote. There shouldn't be anyone else out here. No permits had been issued for this area. I'd checked before leaving. Hunters, maybe? Poachers? I pulled out my binoculars and glassed the area where the smoke rose. Through the trees, I could just make out a clearing. My clearing, the site where I'd camped last night. Someone had made camp in the exact spot I'd just left. I lowered the binoculars, frowning. That didn't make sense. I'd been on the trail all morning. Nobody had passed me, and there was only one trail through this section. They would have had to hike in from a completely different direction, through rough country with no marked paths, just to camp at that specific spot. Unless they'd been there all along, watching, waiting for me to leave. The thought made my skin crawl. I raised the binoculars again, trying to see details. The smoke was definitely coming from a fire, but I couldn't make out a tent or any people moving around. Just that thin column of smoke rising through the trees. I stood there for a long moment, weighing my options. I could hike back down and investigate, confront whoever was there, but that meant losing 3 hours of daylight and retracking miles. Or I could continue forward, report it at my evening check-in, let someone else handle it. The ranger in me knew what I should do. Unknown persons in a restricted area. I needed to make contact, verify permits, ensure they weren't poaching or causing environmental damage. But something in my gut told me not to go back there. I continued north instead, walking faster now, putting distance between me and that smoke. I told myself it was the practical choice. I'd report it tonight, let someone else handle it. I didn't look back. By mid-afternoon, I'd crossed the ridge and dropped down into the upper valley. The terrain here was different, darker, the canopy thicker. Old-growth forest, the trees massive and ancient. It was cooler, too, the air heavy with moisture and the smell of rotting vegetation. I was looking for a good place to make camp when I found it. At first, I thought it was just a fallen log, but as I got closer, I realized what I was seeing. My feet stopped moving, my breath caught in my throat. 50 yards off the trail, partially hidden behind a screen of young pines, was a campsite. My campsite. The tent was there, or something shaped exactly like my tent anyway, except it wasn't nylon and aluminum poles. It was woven from branches and bark, meticulously constructed to match the exact dome shape and size. The fire ring was there too, stones arranged in the precise circle I'd made. Even my gear layout was replicated. A stick positioned where my backpack had been, a carefully folded leaves where my sleeping bag had sat. It was perfect, every detail copied with unnatural precision. And sitting in the center of the fake tent's entrance, arranged just like I'd left my boots the night before, were 2 objects made from twisted root and stone. They looked exactly like boots.
I stood frozen, staring at the impossible campsite. My heart hammered against my ribs, and for a long moment the only sound was my own ragged breathing. This wasn't random. This wasn't some elaborate prank. This was deliberate, calculated. Someone, something had watched me last night, studied every detail of my camp, and then recreated it here, miles away, using materials from the forest. My hand moved to the radio on my delt. I should call this in, report it. But report what, exactly? That someone had built a sculpture of my campsite out of sticks? That I felt watched? Carl would think I was losing it. Hell, maybe I was losing it. I approached slowly, bear spray drawn, every sense on high alert. The construction was remarkable up close.
The tent frame was woven from supple willow branches, bent and twisted with a precision that shouldn't have been possible. The bark covering it had been carefully selected to match the green color of my nylon tent. Even the stake positions were correct, marked by small stones pressed into the earth. I circled the structure, my skin crawling. Whoever made this had to have spent hours on it. But when? I'd only left the Crooked Creek site 6 hours ago. Nobody could have followed me, built this, and gotten ahead of me without me seeing them on the trail. Unless they hadn't followed the trail at all. I knelt beside the boot replicas, careful not to touch them. Up close, I could see they were carved from some kind of root, shaped and positioned with disturbing accuracy. Even the laces were there, thin strips of bark woven in the exact pattern I used. A twig snapped behind me. I spun, bear spray raised, finger on the trigger. Nothing, just trees and shadows and the fading afternoon light. But I could feel it now, that same oppressive silence from last night, spreading through the forest like a held breath. The birds had stopped singing, the insects had gone quiet. Something was watching me. "I know you're there," I called out, hating the tremor in my voice. "This is federal land. Identify yourself." No response, just that terrible, suffocating silence. Then I heard it, faint at first, barely audible over the pounding of my heart. My own voice calling from somewhere in the trees. "I know you're there. This is federal land. Identify yourself." The words were perfect, my exact intonation, my accent, even the slight catch in my throat. It was like listening to a recording of myself, except there was no recording. The sound was coming from the forest, from somewhere I couldn't see. My blood turned to ice water. "Ira?" my voice called again, this time from a different direction. "Ira Saephan? Is someone there?" I backed away from the fake campsite, slowly, keeping my eyes on the tree line. Whatever this was, wherever it was, I needed to get away from it, now. "Ira?" The voice came again, closer this time. "I'm so tired. I just want to go home." That broke something in me. Those were my thoughts, my exact thoughts from last night as I'd sat by the fire. How could it know that? How could anything know that? I turned and ran. Branches whipped at my face as I crashed through the undergrowth, abandoning the trail, just putting distance between myself and that thing. My pack bounced painfully against my spine, but I didn't stop, couldn't stop. Behind me, I heard movement, something large moving through the forest with unnatural speed, and my voice calling after me in the gathering dusk. "Ira, please, don't leave me alone out here! Ira!" I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs threatened to give out, until the forest grew so dark I could barely see where I was going. Finally, I stumbled into a small clearing beside a stream. Different valley. I had no idea where I was anymore, and collapsed against a boulder. My hands shook as I fumbled for my radio. Evening check-in. I'd missed evening check-in. What time was it? I checked my watch. 1947. Nearly 2 hours late. Janice would be worried. I keyed the mic. "Ranger Saephan to base? Janice, do you copy?" Static. "Base, this is Ranger Saephan. Radio check. Do you copy?" More static. Then a burst of garbled noise. Was that a voice? I couldn't tell. "Janice, if you can hear me, there's something out here. Someone's been following me. They've been..." The radio squealed with feedback, and then I heard it, through the static, clear as day. My own voice, speaking from the radio speaker. "Janice, if you can hear me, there's something out here. Someone's been following me." Then Janice's voice, confused. "Ira, you're breaking up. Say again?" And my voice responding, "All clear, just checking in. Everything's fine out here." "Copy that. You had me worried there for a minute. Get some rest." "Will do. Safe and out." The radio went dead. I stared at it, my entire body numb. That conversation hadn't happened. I hadn't said those words, but Janice had heard them. She thought I'd checked in. She thought everything was fine. Whatever was out here, it had just cut me off from the only help I had. I was alone, truly alone, and it was getting dark.
I didn't make camp that night. I couldn't. The thought of sitting still, of being a stationary target in the darkness, was unbearable. Instead, I kept moving, stumbling through the forest by the glow of my headlamp, following the stream because it was the only landmark I could trust. My map was useless now. I'd run so far off course that I had no idea which drainage I was in. Every few minutes, I'd stop and listen. Silence, then footsteps, then silence again. It was tracking me, matching my pace, staying just beyond the reach of my light. Sometimes I'd hear my voice calling from the darkness. Sometimes it was other sounds, branches breaking, rocks clattering, the scrape of something heavy being dragged across the ground. By dawn, I was exhausted and lost. My legs trembled with fatigue, and my pack felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I found myself in a narrow ravine, steep walls rising on either side, the stream cutting through the middle. Not a good position tactically, limited sight lines, only 2 directions to run, but I needed to rest, just for an hour, just to think. I dropped my pack and sat on a flat rock, head in my hands. Think, Ira. Think this through rationally. What were the facts? Fact 1. Something in this forest could mimic human speech perfectly. My speech specifically. Fact 2. It had observed me closely enough to recreate my campsite in exact detail. Fact 3. It could somehow intercept radio transmissions, or mimic those too. Fact 4. It was intelligent, deliberately isolating me, cutting me off from help. The logical part of my brain screamed that this was impossible. There was no animal on Earth capable of this. But the evidence was right in front of me, and I'd learned a long time ago that denying reality doesn't change it. I needed to get out of here. Forget the patrol, forget protocol. I needed to reach the access road, get to a phone, call for help. But which direction? I pulled out my compass, tried to orient myself. If I headed southeast, I should eventually hit the main trail system. Maybe 2 days of hard hiking if I was lucky, 3 if I got turned around. I was repacking my gear when I saw the boot prints. They were in a patch of soft mud beside the stream, maybe 20 feet upstream. Fresh prints, the edges still sharp. I approached slowly, crouched down to examine them. They were boot prints, but wrong. The size was right, roughly matching my own boots, but the shape was off. Too narrow, too long, and the tread pattern made no sense. It looked almost like someone had carved a boot print into a piece of wood and then pressed it into the mud. Artificial, deliberate. I looked up and saw more prints leading upstream, disappearing around a bend in the ravine. And that's when I noticed something else, something that made my stomach drop. There, in the mud, 15 feet away, was another set of boot prints. Real boot prints this time, my boots, my tread pattern, leading in the exact direction I'd been walking. I spun around, scanning the ravine walls. How long had it been following me? How close was it? A low guttural noise echoed through the ravine, a low guttural noise that might have been a cough or might have been laughter. It came from above, somewhere on the rim. I grabbed my pack and ran downstream, splashing through the shallow water, not caring about the noise I was making. The ravine widened ahead, opening into a broader valley. If I could just reach open ground. I rounded a bend and stopped so fast I nearly fell. There, blocking the ravine exit, was a figure. At first glance, it looked human. Tall, maybe 6.5 feet, wearing what appeared to be dark clothing. But as I stared, my eyes struggling to make sense of what they were seeing in the early morning light, the details became wrong. The proportions were off, the arms too long, hanging past where the knees should be, the legs too thin, bent at angles that shouldn't work, and the head The head tilted to one side in a way that made my spine crawl, like a predator studying prey. It wore clothes, but they weren't clothes. They were strips of bark and lichen, draped and arranged to mimic a jacket and pants. The illusion only worked from a distance. Up close, it was clearly something else, something that had observed humans and tried to copy their appearance. We stood there, 30 feet apart, staring at each other. Then it opened its mouth and spoke in my voice. "I'm so tired. I just want to go home." Its face was smooth, too smooth. No features except for dark hollows where eyes should be, and a lipless slit that moved when it spoke. As I watched, frozen in terror, something shifted beneath the surface of its face, like watching shadows move under milky white water. "Why are you running, Ira?" it asked, still in my voice. The head tilted further, impossibly far. "I just want to help. I just want to understand." My hand found the bear spray on my belt. "Stay back," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. The thing took a step forward. Its movement was wrong, too fluid, like it had too many joints. "Stay back," it repeated in my voice, matching my pace perfectly. Then, in a different voice, a woman's voice that I didn't recognize, "Please, I need help. I'm lost." A man's voice, "My daughter is hurt. Please help us." A child's voice, "Daddy? Daddy, where are you?" It was cycling through voices, through phrases, like it was testing them, trying to find the right words to make me stay. I raised the bear spray, finger on the trigger. The thing stopped moving, those hollow eye sockets fixed on me, and I felt something probe at my mind, not physically, but like a presence pressing against my thoughts. Curious, hungry. Then it smiled, or what passed for a smile on that featureless face. The slit widened, revealing darkness inside. And it spoke in a voice I recognized immediately, a voice I hadn't heard in 3 years. Daniel Corver's voice. "Ira, Ira, is that you? Oh, thank God, I've been lost for so long. Please help me. Please don't leave me out here alone." My finger froze on the trigger. My mind went blank with horror. It knew, somehow it knew about Daniel, about the hiker I'd lost, about my failure. "Please, Ira," it said in Daniel's voice, taking another step closer. "I'm so cold. I'm so scared. Why did you leave me? Why didn't you save me?" I screamed and fired.
The orange cloud of bear spray hit the thing directly in what passed for its face. It recoiled with an inhuman shriek, a sound like tearing metal and breaking glass mixed with something organic and wet. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I turned and ran back the way I'd come, splashing through the stream, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Behind me, that awful shrieking continued, echoing off the ravine walls. Then it changed, morphing into words, my words, Daniel's words, a dozen different voices all screaming at once in a chorus of rage and confusion. I scrambled up the steep side of the ravine, grabbing roots and rocks, pulling myself up the slope. My boots slipped on loose scree and I fell hard, scraping my hands raw. But I kept climbing, had to keep climbing. When I reached the top, I risked a glance back. The thing was still down in the ravine, thrashing in the water. Its smooth face was peeling away in strips, revealing something underneath that I wouldn't let myself fully see, dark and glistening and wrong. I ran. The forest was a blur of green and brown. I didn't follow any trail, just crashed through undergrowth, jumped over fallen logs, ducked under low branches. My pack caught on something and I shrugged out of it without stopping, keeping only my water bottle and the knife on my belt. Everything else was dead weight. I ran until the sun was high overhead, until my legs were rubber and my lungs were on fire. Finally, I collapsed in a small clearing, gasping for air. My hands were bleeding from the climb, my face was scratched from branches, and every muscle in my body screamed. But I was alive. I'd gotten away.
I allowed myself 5 minutes to rest, forcing myself to drink water even though my hand shook so badly I spilled half of it. Then I stood, oriented myself with my compass, and started walking southeast, towards civilization, towards safety, toward anything that wasn't here. The afternoon passed in a haze of exhaustion and fear. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like that thing. I kept expecting to hear my voice calling from the trees, but there was only normal forest noise. Birds, wind, the occasional rustle of small animals in the undergrowth. Maybe I'd actually heard it. Maybe the bear spray had done enough damage to make it retreat. Maybe. I stopped walking. Ahead, maybe 100 yards, I saw something through the trees, something that didn't belong. Chain-link fence. I approached cautiously, hardly daring to hope. The fence was 8 feet tall, topped with rusted barbed wire. It stretched left and right as far as I could see, cutting through the forest in a perfectly straight line. Every 50 feet or so, there were weathered signs wired to the fence. I reached the nearest one and read, "Restricted Area, U.S. Forest Service Research Station. Authorized personnel only. Violators will be prosecuted." Below that, in smaller text, Sector 7, Zone Monitoring Station, established 1962. Sector 7. Carl had sent me to Sector 7 for this patrol, and there was a research station here that wasn't on any of my maps. There's been some weird reports from Sector 7 over the years. He'd known. He'd known something was wrong with this area, and he sent me anyway. I found the gate after 10 minutes of walking. It was steel, set into a concrete frame, secured with a heavy padlock. Or it had been secured. The lock hung, broken, dangling from the chain. The gate stood slightly ajar. Fresh scratches marked the metal around the lock. Something had forced it open. Recently, judging by the bright metal showing through the rust. I stood there for a long moment, weighing my options. Behind me was the forest and whatever was hunting me. Ahead was a restricted government facility that shouldn't exist. Neither option was good. But at least the facility might have a phone, or a radio that actually worked, or people who could help. I pushed the gate open and stepped through. The access road beyond was cracked and overgrown, barely visible under years of accumulated leaves and vegetation. But it was definitely a road, wide enough for vehicles, cutting through the trees in a gradual descent. I followed it downhill, and after maybe half a mile, the trees opened up. The facility was built into the side of a mountain, partially hidden by the natural terrain. Concrete structures, small windows, satellite dishes on the roof. The architecture was brutalist and dated, definitely from the 60s or 70s. 3 buildings connected by covered walkways, all painted in forest camouflage that had faded and peeled over the years. The parking area held a single vehicle, a Forest Service truck, just like Carl's, though this one was covered in years of grime and sitting on flat tires. The windows were broken. Everything was silent. No generator hum, no lights, no movement. Abandoned, just like the road. But as I got closer, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The lights were on inside. Not all of them, just a few fluorescent fixtures visible through the small windows, pale, flickering light in the gathering dusk. And I could hear something now, too, a low electrical hum. Power was running. Someone was maintaining this place, or something was. I approached the main entrance, a steel door set into concrete. It stood open about 6 inches, darkness visible beyond. On the doorframe, barely visible in the fading light, was a painted notice that had worn away to barely legible text. Cryptid Monitoring Project, Classification Level 4, Authorized Access Only.
My mouth went dry. Cryptid monitoring. They weren't just aware of what was in these woods, they were studying it. I pulled my knife from its sheath and used my foot to push the door open wider. It swung inward with a rusty squeal that echoed through the building. Inside was a corridor, lit by those same flickering fluorescent lights. Sterile white walls, scuffed linoleum floor, doors on either side. It looked like any government building, except for the layer of dust on everything and the smell.
Stale air, mildew, and something else. Something organic and wrong. I stepped inside, every nerve screaming at me to turn around, but I couldn't. Not without answers, not without knowing what this place was and why Carl had sent me here. The first door on the right was labeled Operations. I tried the handle. Locked. The second door, Specimen Storage, also locked. The third door stood open, no label. I peered inside and saw an office, desk, filing cabinets, a computer on standby, its screen showing a blinking cursor. Papers scattered across every surface. A coffee mug on the desk, long dried, with mold growing inside. I entered and started looking through the papers. Reports, mostly. Observation logs, behavioral studies. One page caught my eye. Subject CM-17, Behavioral Observation Log. Date 08-15-1978. Observer, Dr. Sarah Chen. Subject displayed advanced mimicry capabilities today. It successfully replicated the distress call of a lost child, attracting 2 hikers to within 50 meters of its position. Subject observed hikers for approximately 2 hours before disengaging. No aggressive behavior noted. Note: subject appears to be learning. Each encounter shows increased sophistication in vocal mimicry and behavioral patterns. Recommend continued monitoring with extreme caution. Staff reminded: do not engage directly. Do not make eye contact. Do not respond to vocalizations. I flipped through more pages, more logs, more observations, spanning decades. 1978, 1983, 1991, 2003, 2015. 2015, just 10 years ago. This facility had been active recently. The computer screen flickered. I looked at it, and my heart stopped. Text was appearing on the screen, typing itself out one letter at a time. Hello, Ira.
I stumbled backward, knocking into the desk. The coffee mug fell and shattered on the floor. On the screen, more text appeared. Don't be afraid. I just want to understand. My hand tightened on the knife handle. Who are you? I whispered. The cursor blinked. Then, I've been watching you. You're different from the others. You came back. What others? I said, louder now. What the hell is this place? They studied me here, trapped me, hurt me. I didn't understand then, but I understand now. I learned from them, learned their words, their voices, their fear. I backed toward the door, eyes fixed on the screen. This wasn't possible. The thing from the forest couldn't type. It couldn't use computers. Unless... The lights in the corridor flickered. I heard a sound deeper in the facility, metal scraping against concrete, slow and deliberate. Something was in here with me. The screen continued. You lost someone once, Daniel. I found him, Ira, 3 years ago. He was alone, lost, calling for help. I tried to help him, tried to understand what he needed, but I didn't know enough then. I made mistakes. My vision blurred with tears. What did you do to him? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt him. I just wanted to learn, to be like you, to not be alone anymore. The scraping sound came closer. I could hear it moving through the corridors, searching. The computer screen flickered again. They made me alone, kept me in the dark. I escaped, but I'm still alone. Everyone runs. Everyone screams. You're the first one who came back, who came here. I didn't come back, I said through clenched teeth. You chased me here. The cursor blinked for a long moment. Then, did I? The scraping stopped. The silence was worse than the sound. I bolted from the office, running deeper into the facility instead of back toward the entrance. Instinct told me that's where it was, blocking my escape. I needed another way out. There had to be another exit, an emergency door, something. The corridor branched. I took the right path, running past more offices, a break room with a refrigerator hanging open, spoiled food fossilized inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered overhead, some working, some dead, casting everything in stuttering illumination. I found a door marked Research Lab, Authorized Personnel. I tried the handle. It opened. Inside was a large room filled with equipment I didn't recognize, monitors, recording devices, banks of old computers with reel-to-reel tape drives. The walls were covered with photographs, hundreds of them, all grainy, all taken from a distance, trail camera photos. And in every single one was the thing from the forest. I moved closer, studying them. The photos were dated, spanning from 1962 to recent years. In the earliest ones, the creature looked almost animal-like, hunched, primitive, moving on all fours. But as the years progressed, it changed, stood more upright. Its movements became more human. In a photo from 1985, it appeared to be building something, a structure that looked disturbingly like a shelter. It was learning, evolving, becoming more human with each passing year. On a corkboard beside the photos was a map of Sector 7 covered with red dots, dozens of them scattered throughout the area. Each dot was labeled with a date and initials. I recognized some of the initials from missing persons reports I'd filed over the years, hikers who'd vanished without a trace. And there, in the corner of the map, was a fresh red dot with yesterday's date. My initials, I.S. They'd known. They'd known I was coming. This whole thing was planned. A filing cabinet stood against the wall. I yanked open the top drawer and pulled out the first folder. It was labeled Ranger Rotation, Sector 7, Monitoring. Inside were personnel files, rangers who'd been sent on patrols in this area over the decades. Each file had the same notation at the bottom, behavioral subject for CM17 observation. I flipped through them with shaking hands. Jenkins, Steve D., disappeared 2019. Subject lost to CM17. Project continuity maintained. Martinez, Rosa L., disappeared 2015. Subject lost to CM17. Project continuity maintained. Corver, Daniel M., disappeared 2022. Civilian, accidental exposure. Subject lost to CM17. Cover story implemented. Daniel. They'd known about Daniel, and they'd called it an accidental exposure, like he was a test subject who'd wandered into the wrong lab. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the papers. I found my own file at the back. Saephan, Ira A., Ranger, Solo Patrol Specialist. Psychological profile indicates isolation preference following Corver incident. Recommended for Sector 7 rotation. Excellent behavioral subject. High probability of extended field observation. Below that, in Carl's handwriting, approved for deployment. 2-week patrol, minimal radio contact, standard monitoring protocols in place. Carl knew. Carl had sent me here deliberately, fed me to this thing like bait. A sound behind me made me spin around. The creature stood in the doorway. But it wasn't alone anymore. There were others, 3 of them, standing in the corridor behind it. They looked similar. Tall, too thin proportions, that same smooth, featureless face. But each one wore different stolen clothing, different arrangements of bark and lichen and fabric, different attempts to being human. The first one, my stalker, tilted its head and spoke in a chorus of voices, all the people it had taken. You understand now. They made us, fed us, studied us. We learned from everyone they sent. Learned words, learned faces, learned loneliness. Another stepped forward, speaking in a woman's voice I didn't recognize. We just want to belong, to understand, to not be alone in the dark anymore.
The third one raised an arm, too long, too many joints, and pointed at me. When it spoke, it used Daniel Jenkins' voice. "Join us, Ira. Stay. Teach us. We'll learn from you. We'll become you, and you'll never be alone anymore." They moved into the room, slowly, carefully, like they were approaching a frightened animal. Behind them, I could see the corridor stretching back toward the entrance. No way past them, no escape. I looked around desperately. The research lab had no other doors, just one large observation window on the far wall, looking out into another room. No, not a room, a cell. I could see it through the thick glass, a containment chamber with concrete walls, heavy restraints bolted to the floor, scratch marks covering every surface. And in the corner, a door, an emergency exit door with a crash bar, painted bright red. The creatures were getting closer. The first one reached out to me with those two long fingers. "Please don't run again. It hurts when you run. It makes us remember being alone." I grabbed a desk chair and swung it with everything I had. The chair crashed through the observation window in an explosion of safety glass. Alarms started blaring instantly, a deafening klaxon that echoed through the facility. The creatures recoiled from the noise, their smooth faces turning toward the sound, confused. I didn't hesitate. I dove through the broken window, rolled across the floor of the containment cell, and ran for the red door. Behind me, I heard them climbing through the window, heard their voices mixing with the alarm, calling my name in a dozen different tones. I hit the crash bar, and the door burst open into cool night air, and I ran into the forest, with monsters that used to be human, screaming behind me.
The forest at night was a maze of shadows and sound. I ran blind, branches tearing at my clothes, roots trying to trip me with every step. The facility alarms faded behind me, but I could still hear them, the creatures crashing through the undergrowth. They were faster than me, more adapted to this terrain. They were hurting me. I realized it too late. The ground disappeared beneath my feet, and I was falling, tumbling down a steep embankment. I hit the bottom hard, the impact driving the air from my lungs. For a moment I just lay there, gasping, staring up at the canopy silhouetted against the stars. Move. I had to move. I forced myself up, wincing at the pain in my ribs. I was in another ravine, narrower than the last one, with steep walls on either side. Water trickled somewhere in the darkness. I pulled out my flashlight with shaking hands and clicked it on. The beam illuminated something that made my blood freeze. Bodies. Not fresh. These had been here for years, decades, some of them. They were scattered throughout the ravine, partially buried in leaves and soil. Skeletons still wearing rotted clothing, backpacks weathered to scraps. And on some of them, arranged carefully on their chests, were bundles of sticks. The same bundles I'd seen in the fake campsite, placed there like offerings, were markers. This was where they brought them. All the people who'd been sent into Sector 7, all the behavioral subjects. This ravine was their graveyard. I swept my light across the remains, counting. 15, 20, maybe more buried under the leaves. How long had this been going on? How many rangers had Carl sent to their deaths? My light landed on something that punched the air from my lungs. A ranger vest, still relatively intact, draped over a skeleton, sitting propped against the ravine wall. The name patch was faded but readable. S. Jenkins. Steve. I'd found Steve Jenkins. His journal lay in his lap, protected from the elements by his body. I approached slowly, my light shaking. His skull was tilted back, jaw hanging open, in what might have been a scream or a laugh. It was impossible to tell after so long. I reached down and picked up the journal with numb fingers. The final pages were intact. I had to know, had to understand what had happened to him. The last entry was dated 5 years ago. Day 12. I know I'm not getting out of here. My leg is broken and I can barely move.
The things. I don't know what else to call them. They keep coming closer. Sometimes they sit nearby and watch me. Sometimes they try to talk, using voices of people I know, people I've lost. They're not malicious, I don't think. They're curious, like children who don't understand that they're hurting their toys. One of them tried to touch me yesterday, and when I screamed, it backed away and made a sound like crying, like it was sad that I was afraid. I found the facility, the research station. I understand now what this place is, what they've been doing. They're not trying to contain these creatures. They're creating them, or studying how they evolve. The reports I found. Jesus Christ, the reports. These things were here first, before the facility, maybe before us, but the researchers drew them in, fed them, taught them, conditioned them to associate humans with, I don't know, food, learning, connection, and then they just kept sending rangers in, year after year, like feeding time at the zoo. If anyone finds this, don't come to Sector 7. Don't trust Carl Fortier. Don't trust any of them. They know. The whole thing is a study. We're the experiment. I'm sorry I couldn't warn anyone. I'm sorry I... The entry ended there. His pen had trailed off the page. A sound above me made me look up. They were on the rim of the ravine, silhouetted against the stars. 4 of them now, maybe more, just standing there, watching. One of them spoke in Steve's voice, the real Steve, not a mimicry. They must have learned it from him before he died. He understood at the end. We tried to keep him comfortable. We didn't want him to suffer. We're not monsters. We just don't know how to be anything else. I backed away, my light sweeping across the ravine walls. There had to be a way out. There had to be. My light caught something carved on the rock face. Words, scratched deep into the stone. Recent, maybe a few years old. More of Steve's handwriting. Emergency. Exit. Follow water downstream. Old service tunnel. 1/4 mile. The water. The trickle I'd heard when I fell. I spun, searching for it with my light, and found a thin stream running along the base of the ravine. It disappeared into a dark opening between the rocks, a drainage tunnel, maybe 3 feet high.
The creatures were climbing down into the ravine now, moving with that unsettling, fluid grace. I had seconds. I dropped to my hands and knees and crawled into the tunnel. The space was tight, water soaking through my pants, rocks scraping my back. I could hear them behind me, their voices echoing in the confined space. "Please don't go. Please stay. We can learn from you. You can teach us how to be human. Ira, don't leave us alone. We're so tired of being alone. We'll be gentle this time. We've learned. We know how to be careful now." I crawled faster, ignoring the pain in my ribs, the cuts on my hands. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, winding through the rock. Behind me, I could hear them trying to follow, their bodies scraping against the stone. They were too big for this space, their proportions too wrong. But they were still coming. The tunnel opened suddenly, and I half fell, half crawled out into a larger chamber. My flashlight beam swept across concrete walls, rusted machinery, old electrical panels. Steve was right. This was a service tunnel, part of the facility's original infrastructure. And there, on the far side of the chamber, was a metal ladder leading up to a hatch. I ran for it, grabbed the rungs, and climbed. Below, the creatures were emerging from the drainage tunnel, unfolding themselves into the chamber. They looked up at me with those eyeless faces, and I could feel their loneliness like a physical weight pressing down. The first one spoke in Daniel's voice. 3 years, Ira. I've been trying to tell you I'm sorry for 3 years. I didn't understand what happened. I tried to help him, tried to understand what he needed, but I hurt him instead. And he taught me what pain sounds like before he stopped making sounds at all. Tears streamed down my face as I climbed. I didn't want to hear this, didn't want to know. I keep his voice with me,
All of their voices, so they won't be forgotten, so they won't be alone. Don't you see? We're trying to help. We're trying to remember. We're trying to be good. I reached the hatch and pushed. It was heavy, rusted shut. I pushed harder, putting all my weight into it. The metal groaned. Below, they were climbing the ladder, multiple hands reaching up, too many joints bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. The hatch burst open, and I hauled myself up into cool night air. I was in the forest again, maybe 100 yards from the facility. I could see the lights still flickering inside through the trees. I slammed the hatch shut and looked around for something to wedge it closed. A fallen branch. I shoved it through the handle, knowing it wouldn't hold for long. Then I heard the sound that almost made me weep with relief. A vehicle, an engine, headlights cutting through the trees. Someone was coming up the access road. I ran toward the lights, waving my arms, shouting, "Help! Please! I need help!" The vehicle stopped, a ranger truck. The door opened, and Carl Forder stepped out, flashlight in hand. He saw me, and his face went carefully blank. "Ira, Jesus Christ, you're alive. We've been searching for—" You knew what was out here. You sent me here to die." Carl's hand moved to his radio. "Dispatch, this is Forder. I've found Ranger Saephan. He's disoriented, possibly hypothermic, requesting immediate medical." "Don't you dare," I snarled. "Don't you dare pretend. I found the facility. I found the files. I know everything." Carl's expression hardened. Behind him, another figure emerged from the truck. A woman in civilian clothes, holding a tablet. She looked at me with cold, professional interest. "Mr. Saephan, my name is Dr. Patricia Walters. I'm with the Forest Service Research Division. You've had a very traumatic experience. We're here to help you." "Help me," I laughed, the sound brittle and broken. "Like you helped Steve Jenkins? Like you helped all the others?" Dr. Walters exchanged a glance with Carl. "I think we should continue this conversation somewhere more secure. Carl, if you would." A scream cut through the night. Not human, not animal, something in between. The creatures were coming.
They emerged from the tree line like nightmares given form. 4 of them, moving in that fluid, two-jointed way that made my eyes hurt to watch. Carl stumbled backward, his hand going to his sidearm. Dr. Walters went rigid, her professional mask cracking. "Get in the truck," Carl said, his voice tight. "Now!" But the creatures weren't advancing. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of the headlights, standing, watching. One of them, the first one, my stalker, tilted its head and spoke in a woman's voice I now recognized from the facility logs. "Hello, Patricia. It's been a long time." Dr. Walters' face went white. That's Dr. Chen's voice, Sarah Chen. She disappeared in 1987. "I didn't disappear," the creature said, still in Sarah's voice. "I stayed. I chose to stay. You all left me here." Another creature stepped forward, speaking in a man's voice, older, authoritative. "Project Cryptid Monitor was discontinued in 2003. All personnel were evacuated, but they left us behind, left us in the dark with no one to teach us, no one to help us understand." Carl's gun was shaking in his hand. "What the hell are they?" "Not what," I said bitterly. "Who?" They were people. Researchers, rangers. They're what happens when those things out there get close enough to someone for long enough. They don't just mimic voices, they absorb them, integrate them. The person becomes part of the creature. Dr. Walters was tapping frantically on her tablet. "That's not— the original research indicated mimicry only, vocal learning, not integration, not—" "Your research was incomplete," the creature interrupted, now speaking in multiple voices at once. Sarah Chen, the older man, Steve Jenkins, all overlapping. "We didn't understand ourselves then, but we've had years to learn, years to grow, years to become."
The thing that had been my stalker moved closer, just to the edge of the light. I could see it more clearly now, its surface rippling like water, shifting, changing. Parts of it looked almost human, other parts were still that smooth, featureless wrongness I'd first seen. It spoke in Daniel's voice. "You want to know what happened to Daniel Corver, Ira? He's here, part of me. I carry him, his fear, his hope, his last thoughts of you. Tell Ira I'm sorry," he said at the end. "Tell him I should have listened." I wanted to scream, to rage, to deny it, but I could hear the truth in those words. That was something Daniel would say. "You're lying," I whispered. "I'm incapable of lying. I can only repeat what I've learned, what I've absorbed. Daniel is the reason I understand apology. Steve taught me loneliness. Rosa taught me prayer. Sarah taught me curiosity. And you're teaching me desperation." Carl fired. The gunshot cracked through the night, painfully loud. The bullet hit the creature center mass, and it stumbled backward. Dark fluid leaked from the wound, not blood, something else, thick and oily. But it didn't fall. It straightened, and the wound began to close, the edges knitting together like time-lapse footage of healing. "It won't work," it said, now in Carl's own voice. "I learned that from the soldiers they sent in 1979. Bullets don't stop us. Fire slows us. Cold confuses us. But we adapt. We always adapt." More shapes were emerging from the forest. I counted 6, 8, 10. How many were there? Dr. Walters grabbed my arm. "The facility, there's a panic room in the admin building, reinforced. It was designed for this scenario. We need to—" "There's a scenario?" I yanked my arm away. "You people planned for this? You knew they could do this, and you still—" "We thought they were contained," she shouted. "We thought the monitoring protocols were sufficient. We didn't know they'd evolved this far." The creatures were forming a circle around us now, not threatening, just surrounding, trapping. One of them spoke in a child's voice. "We don't want to hurt anyone. We never wanted to hurt anyone. We just wanted to understand, to belong, to not be the only ones in the dark."
Carl fired again, and again. The bullets did nothing. He dropped the empty magazine with shaking hands, fumbling for a spare. "The panicked room," Dr. Walters said urgently. "It's our only chance. We can seal ourselves in. Radio for help." "Radio won't work," I said. "They can mimic radio signals. They can make anyone think everything's fine. Who's going to believe us?" The creature that had my voice stepped forward. In the headlights, I could finally see it clearly. It was changing before my eyes, growing, shifting. Parts of it were solidifying into something more defined. It was trying to look human, trying to look like me. "You could stay," it said in my voice. "Teach us. We need to understand humanity, and you're so good at being alone. We're alone too. We could learn together." "On nothing like you," I spat. "Aren't you?" It tilted its head. "You push everyone away. You isolate yourself. You've been preparing to join us for years, Ira. You just didn't know it." Behind me, I heard the truck engine rev. Carl had gotten back in, was throwing it into reverse. "Get in!" he shouted. "Now!" I ran for the truck, Dr. Walters right behind me. We dove into the back seat as Carl floored it, the truck's tires spinning in the dirt. The creatures didn't chase us. They just stood there, watching as we retreated back down the access road. "The gate!" Dr. Walters gasped. "We need to seal the gate, contain them in the sector." "That gate's been broken for years," I said. "They've been out. They've been free this whole time. How many people have gone missing in these mountains, Carl? How many?" Carl's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, guilt written across his face. "The containment was never about keeping them in," he said quietly. "It was about keeping people out. Sector 7 was supposed to be restricted, off limits, but budget cuts, personnel shortages, we started using it for regular patrols 5 years ago. I thought they were gone.
I thought they'd migrated or died or—" "You thought wrong," I said. We reached the gate. It was open, the broken lock hanging uselessly. Carl drove through and I jumped out, trying to push it closed. The hinges were rusted, the frame warped. It wouldn't seal. "Leave it," Dr. Walters said. "It won't matter anyway. If they want out, they'll get out." I climbed back in and Carl drove. We made it maybe 2 miles before the headlights caught movement on the road ahead. They were waiting for us. Not just 4 or 5, dozens, standing across the road in a line, blocking our path. All different sizes, different stages of transformation. Some looked almost human. Others were still that horrible, smooth wrongness. Carl slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop. "Back up! Turn around! Go back!" "There's more behind us!" I looked out the rear window. We were surrounded. The creature with my voice approached the driver's side window. Carl raised his gun, but his hand was shaking so badly he could barely aim. It spoke, and this time the voice wasn't mine. It was all of them, every person it had absorbed, speaking in unison. "We're not prisoners anymore. We're not specimens. We learned what we needed from this place. We understand now what we are, what we can become, and we're leaving." "You can't leave," Dr. Walters whispered. "You can't leave the sector. If you reach populated areas—" "We'll learn more," it said simply. "We'll meet more people, understand more voices, become more human. Isn't that what you wanted? Isn't that what the project was for?" "The project was to study you, to understand you, not to—" "You created us. Your curiosity, your fear, your loneliness. We learned it all from you. We're your children, Patricia, and children don't stay in the dark forever." The creatures parted, opening a path down the road, away from the facility, towards civilization. The one with my voice leaned close to the window. "Go, Ira. Tell them what you saw. Warn them if you want, but they won't believe. They never believe, and by the time they do, we'll already be among them, learning, growing, becoming." It stepped back, and Carl didn't hesitate. He floored the accelerator, and we shot forward through the gap they'd left. I looked back through the rear window and saw them standing in the road watching us go. And then, one by one, they melted back into the forest.
We drove through the night in silence. Carl's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Dr. Walters stared at her tablet, scrolling through files with shaking fingers. I sat in the back seat, watching the trees blur past, waiting for something to jump out at us, but nothing did. By dawn, we reached the main ranger station. Carl pulled into the parking lot and killed the engine. For a long moment, none of us moved. "What do we tell them?" Carl finally asked, his voice hoarse. Dr. Walters closed her tablet. "Nothing. We tell them nothing." I leaned forward. "You can't be serious. Those things are heading for populated areas. People need to be warned." "Warned about what?" she snapped. "Monsters in the woods that absorb people? Creatures that can mimic voices and appearances? They'll think we're insane. Best case scenario, we're all put on psychiatric leave. Worst case, we cause mass panic." "People are going to die," I said. "People are always dying in these mountains," Carl said quietly. "Hikers get lost, hunters have accidents. It's tragic, but it happens. If we start talking about what we saw, we'll destroy our careers. The Forest Service will bury us, and those things will still be out there." I stared at him, disbelief warring with exhaustion. "You knew, all along you knew people were being sent to die, and you did nothing." His eyes met mine in the mirror. "I thought it was contained. I swear to God, Ira, I thought—" "You thought wrong," I repeated, "and now it's too late."
Janice Meadows came out of the station, relief flooding her face when she saw us. She ran to the truck and pulled open my door. "Ira, oh my God! We've been trying to reach you for 2 days. Your radio, we thought—" She stopped, taking in my appearance. The torn clothes, the scratches, the look in my eyes. What happened out there? I opened my mouth. Dr. Walters caught my eye in the mirror, her expression a clear warning. "Radio malfunction," Carl said before I could speak. "Ira got turned around in the dark, took a fall. We found him this morning. He's exhausted, but okay." Janice looked between us, her brow furrowed. "A fall? Ira, you look like you've been through hell. You need to see a doctor." "I'm fine," I said. The lie tasted like ash. The next 48 hours were a blur. Medical examination, debriefing, incident reports. Every time I tried to tell the truth, Dr. Walters was there, steering the conversation. Carl backed her up. My radio malfunctioned. I got disoriented. I fell. I was lucky to survive. The official story wrote itself. On the 3rd day, I was called into the regional director's office. Dr. Walters was there, along with 2 men in suits I didn't recognize. They offered me extended paid leave, psychological counseling, a commendation for surviving such a harrowing ordeal. The message was clear: take the out, keep quiet, move on. I took the leave. What choice did I have? But I didn't move on. Janice Meadows found me at home 2 weeks later. I'd been avoiding everyone, screening calls, not answering the door, but she was persistent. She stood on my porch and knocked until I opened it. "You're going to talk to me," she said, pushing past me into the house. "I don't care what the official report says. I know you, Ira. I know when something's wrong." I wanted to shut down, to push her away like I'd been doing for 3 years, but looking at her, at the genuine concern in her eyes, something broke in me. I told her everything. I expected her to laugh, to call me crazy, to leave. Instead, she pulled out her phone and showed me something she'd been researching. Missing persons reports. Dozens of them, not just in Sector 7, but in remote areas across multiple national forests. Hikers, hunters, rangers, all vanished without a trace. And in several cases, witnesses reported hearing voices of missing loved ones, calling from the woods, seeing familiar faces in the trees. "I've been tracking these," she said quietly, "for years, ever since Steve Jenkins disappeared. There's a pattern, Ira. It's not just our forest, it's everywhere." She showed me more. Online forums where people shared stories of encounters in the woods, things that mimicked their voices, figures that looked almost human but moved wrong. Most posts were dismissed as creepypasta, fiction, urban legends, but some weren't. Some included coordinates, dates, names. "What if we are not the only ones who know?" Janice said. "What if there are others, people who've seen what you've seen and couldn't speak up?"
I stared at the screen, at the desperate attempts to warn people, at the mockery and disbelief in the comments. "They're already out there," I said. "The creatures. They left the sector. They're spreading." "Then we need to document it," Janice said firmly. "We need evidence. We need to connect with other survivors, build a case that can't be ignored. The Forest Service will bury us. Probably, but we have to try." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. She was offering me something I'd been running from since Daniel died. Connection, partnership, trust. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Because I believe you," she said simply, "and because if we don't do something, more people will die." That night, I started writing. Everything I remembered, every detail, every horrifying moment. Janice helped me organize it, fact-check dates, cross-reference with missing persons reports. We found others: a former ranger in Oregon who'd had a similar experience, a park archaeologist in Montana who documented strange structures deep in the wilderness, structures that looked like twisted parodies of human buildings, a cryptozoologist in Washington who'd been laughed out of academia for insisting that mimics were real. We built a network, shared information,
documented patterns. The Forest Service noticed. 2 months after I went public with my first post, I received a termination notice. Performance issues, psychological instability. The reasons didn't matter. The message was clear. Carl Fortier called me once after that. "You should stop," he said. "You're ruining your life." "My life was already ruined," I told him, "the moment you sent me to Sector 7. He was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry, Ira, I truly am, but you have to understand, it's bigger than us, bigger than you. The things you're trying to expose, if people knew the truth, the panic would what? Save lives, prevent disappearances, keep others from going through what I went through? Would destroy everything," he said. "The national parks, the forests. People would be too afraid to go outside. The economic impact alone." I hung up on him. 6 months later, there was a news story. 3 hikers missing in Wyoming. Search and rescue had found their campsite abandoned, food still cooking over the fire, no signs of struggle. But witnesses at a nearby trailhead reported hearing the missing hikers' voices calling from the woods 2 days after they vanished. The official explanation, the witnesses were mistaken, probably heard other hikers. The missing 3 had likely fallen into a ravine, and their bodies would be recovered eventually. I knew better. I'm recording this now because it's been a year since my patrol in Sector 7. A year since I learned what's really in the deep forests. A year of trying to warn people, trying to make them understand. Some believe me, most don't. But the disappearances continue. The reports keep coming in. And every time I see a new missing persons alert for a remote hiking area, I wonder if it's happening again. If they're learning from someone new. Becoming more human. I still hear it sometimes. My own voice calling to me late at night. Sometimes it's outside my window. Sometimes it's just in my head. I don't know if it's trauma or if something actually followed me home. Janice says it's PTSD, that I need more counseling. She's probably right. But I also know what I saw, what I experienced, and I know those things are still out there, getting smarter, getting better at passing for human. So if you're a ranger, or if you work in the national forests, or if you're planning a deep backcountry trip, listen to me. If you hear someone calling your name in the woods and you can't see who it is, don't answer. If you find a campsite that looks exactly like yours in a place it shouldn't be, leave immediately. If the forest goes completely silent, run. And whatever you do, don't go into the restricted zones. Don't trust your superiors when they say an area is safe for solo patrol. Don't believe the official explanations for missing persons. Because the things in the deep woods are real. They're learning, they're spreading, and they're very, very patient. This is Ira Saephan, former forest ranger, signing off. Stay out of the deep woods, please. For your own sake, stay out of the deep woods.